Today marks the official beginning of free agency in Major League Baseball, so on the show, we're going to rank our top 10 free agent targets for the Mariners. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Thursday, November 10th, 2022. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description below. And on the show today, Colby and I are ranking our top 10 free agent targets for the Mariners, so let's just get right into it. Colby, let's start with your number 10 here. Right-handed pitcher, Jameson Taillon, who spent the last season with the Yankees. Why do you like Taillon for the Mariners?
He's good.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty much end of analysis. Taillon, 30 years old, right-handed pitcher. Kind of the thing that stands out about him is that he does not walk guys. He is a career 5.9 base on ball percentage. Major league average is 8.4, so he's significantly below that. 94th percentile in walk rate last year, but he also did some other things pretty well last year. 64th percentile in hard hit percentage, 69th percentile in chase rate, although only 35th percentile in Ks. So pretty good stuff. He's just not getting a lot of swing and misses in the zone. But 85th percentile fastball spin, 83rd percentile curveball spin, gets pretty good extension. He's 6'5", 230. He's a bigger dude. So yeah, I think Taillon is probably a number 4 starter. I think there's a little more in there that you might be able to get out. The Yankees historically not too great when it comes to getting the best out of, talented starting pitchers. You look at what happened with Sonny Gray, and you look at what happened most notably right now with Frankie Montas. Now, maybe that's injury. I mean, it probably is, but
Yeah,
it's still, it's the Yankees are not this, pitching development juggernaut. The Mariners are kind of turning into one. So he's 30 years old. You're probably not going to get a ton more out of him, but ran a 3.91 ERA, a 4.20 xERA. That's a number 4, and I think that's possible. The Mariners can get him to a number 3. 94 mile an hour fastball, really good curveball and slider. It's a profile I think the Mariners would be interested in, and I think they could actually help him by pitch selection. The sinker, the cutter, the changeup, those are his 3 worst pitches. They all got hit pretty hard this last year, but he threw them 30% of the time. So this is a fastball, slider, curveball guy. Maybe they can clean up one of those 4 pitches, but he probably just needs to use those a bit more. And I think maybe, just maybe, he can get to a number 3 spot in the Mariners rotation, but he's also going to be pretty reasonably priced. So yeah, Taillon, interesting arm. Not, definitely the number 5 in this rotation. But I think it's a number 5. If Taillon is your 5, you have an elite rotation. Let's just call it what it is.
yeah. Also want to mention here real quick before I get into my number 10 that, this list is based upon, who we realistically think could be options for the Mariners, how they fit, what the Mariners' needs are, all that stuff comes into play here when making this list. So my number 10 is also a right-handed pitcher from the AL East, Nathan Eovaldi from the Red Sox. I've loved Eovaldi for a long time here. He's 32 years old. He's been unable to stay healthy, though. That's been the issue for him. 67 2/3 innings pitched back in 2019, then 109 1/3 innings pitched this past season. But when he was on the mound this season, he was pretty good. 3.87 ERA, 4.30 FIP, not great. 8.48 Ks per 9, 1.65 walks per 9. The interesting thing that I found in reviewing Eovaldi's season this past year, he started throwing the splitter a lot more. 39.1% whiff rate for the splitter, which was his second most thrown pitch, right over his curveball. Opposing hitters were hitting just 181 and slugging 229 off of that pitch. So Seems like maybe he's found something there with that splitter. The big thing is just, can he stay healthy? But he's pitched in a lot of big games, and to add him to the back end of your rotation, I mean, like with Tyone, like with what you said with Tyone, you're building an elite rotation if you add someone like Evaldi to the back end of it. So coming in at number 9 for you, Colby, Michael Conforto, the outfielder formerly of the Mets, who is a Washington State native, grew up a Mariners fan, all that good stuff. Did not play this past year because he was coming off of kind of a down year for him in 2021, and then had a shoulder thing that cropped up. There was also some issues with his vaccine status that was given teams hesitation as well. But now it seems like he's healthy again. He's, of course, a Scott Boras client, so it's not going to be easy to negotiate and land him. But why do you like Conforto as a fit for the Mariners?
Yeah, he's a left-handed bat. He's a little bit of an upgrade defensively over Mitch Haniger. I think he is. I think, believe it or not, he's less of an injury risk than Mitch Haniger, which is odd to say because Conforto has had his own issues staying on the field. But basically, I need a Mitch Haniger type on this roster, and Conforto is better than Mitch Haniger and a better bet. So that's why he gets on the list, and Haniger, spoiler alert, is not on my list. Because honestly, they're two very similar players. But again, Conforto, a little bit better defensively. At least last time we saw him, he was. And he's a left-handed bat. He's also got a higher upside at the plate than Haniger does. I think his skill set is going to age better than Mitch, who is basically turned into a dead pull power hitter. And that's not conducive for a ton of success at T-Mobile, but we'll see. If you can put Haniger over Conforto, I'm not going to chastise you for it. I totally get it, but I just think Conforto is just an overall better fit, and it's a pretty thin market for corner outfield bats, at least in free agency. So Conforto is just one of the best available that I thought the Mariners had a realistic shot to go get. So he just barely cracks the list at number 9.
My number 9 as well is Michael Conforto, for really all the reasons that you mentioned. He's, I don't think that he's necessarily a safe bet because we just don't know where he is right now health-wise. I mean, I presume that he is healthy at this point now. But what does that look like? And also, he did, as I said earlier, kind of have a down year by his standards. 232, 344, 384 back in 2021. That's still a slightly above average hitter, though. 106 WRC plus. He was worth 1.4 F4, 21.7% strikeout rate, 12.3 walk rate. And he's a career 255, 356, 468 hitter. That's a 124 WRC plus. I think he's probably somewhere in the middle, at least. I think you can bank on that, on him being somewhere in between his career norms and what 2021 was for him. Obviously, taking the year off from baseball in general is concerning because you really don't know. But he's still relatively young at 29 years old. He'll be playing the 2023 season at age 30. He turns 30 on March 1st. But there's still a lot to like there, and there's a nice story that goes along with it as well, with him coming back playing for his team now that they're perennial or not perennial, but now that they're playoff contenders and possibly World Series contenders, and for him to maybe help out with them getting to that next step. All right, so coming in at number 8 for you, Chris Bassett, who the Mariners, as far as I'm aware, tried to trade for last offseason when he was still a member of the Oakland Athletics, but there was reportedly a AL West tax that the A's were placing on some of their players in those negotiations with the Mariners. But Bassett now hits free agency, so assuming that the Mariners still have interest in him, why do you like him for Seattle?
Pretty similar to Tyone. He's just a very good pitcher. Bassett, we know, works in the American League West. He's probably better than Tyone. I think he's a pretty safe number 3 at this stage of his career. And again, we talk about how can the Mariners get an edge on other teams in the American League. Well, they could do it with their pitching, because 1 through 4 right now is already if not, the best 1 through 4 in the American League. It's right up there with anybody's. And then you add another mid rotation arm to the back end, and all of a sudden you have an elite rotation that could, even compete with the Dodgers, 1 through 5. And so Bassett to me is probably the most underrated player on the market right now. He's a pitcher, and I feel like he's getting kind of overlooked by a lot of players. He's 34, 35 years old, so it's going to be a shorter term deal. I think there's a chance Chris Bassett is Charlie Morton, just in terms of a guy who just kind of, you know, older in his 30s. He's only going to get 2-3 year deal, maybe a 1 year deal even. It's going to be a little bit higher AAV, but he's a guy that you can just kind of work on a year-to-year basis with, and just kind of pay to solidify the back end of your rotation. And there are times where he'll look like a top of the rotation option, and he'll push us to ask, hey, is Robbie Ray your number 5? Which, I mean, if that's the case, then again, you just have an elite rotation. So Bassett to me is just a very good pitcher that I don't think gets enough love in this free agent class.
My number 8 is Brandon Drury. Now, more likely than not, you are not going to land one of the top 4 shortstops on the free agent market. Mm-hmm. So what is your fallback plan? For me, that would be Drury. Obviously, there's some interesting targets on the trade market as well, but in terms of just free agents, I think Drury fits and makes a lot of sense here. He completely reinvented himself on a bad Cincinnati team, ended up getting traded at the deadline to the Padres, kind of fell off a little bit. He slashed 274, 335, 520 in Cincinnati with a 131 WRC plus. Then he ended up slashing 238, 290, 435 with a 105 WRC plus at San Diego. So still an above average hitter with the Padres. Ended up hitting 28 home runs in total on the season, slashing 263, 320, 492 with a 123 WRC plus. He was worth 3 wins by Fangraph standards, 22.2% strikeout rate, 6.7% walk rate. It's at the very least, like I feel like there's bound to be some regression there because Brandon Drury's just never been this guy. But the power is something that cannot be ignored here. And if you can add some power up the middle, I think that would be huge for the Mariners because they haven't really gotten power out of either one of those spots in the middle infield for some time now. And so to be able to add that, Drury's an average-ish defender there, and he can also play a couple other spots along the diamond as well. So, he doesn't necessarily need to be your everyday second baseman either. I think he makes some sense even if you do get one of the middle infielders and play them at second or short, whatever. So, because projections right now have him set to make $9-ish million a year. That's a steal for Brandon Drury, for who Brandon Drury was this past season, even with some of the struggles that he had in San Diego. And yeah, the Mariners didn't seem to have a lot of interest in Drury at the deadline. I think that was more so because they didn't want to trade a lot for a rental, right? I think their level of interest will change now that he's a free agent, now that you can get him for just money in years. So we're going to be doing 7 through 1 on our top 10 free agent lists in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by Simply Safe. If you thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Mariners listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 per day. That's less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With top ratings rated Simply Safe app. Stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. Arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. There's no safe like Simply Safe. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. So, number 7 on your list, Colby, Andrew Benintendi, the outfielder formerly of the Royals, made an all-star team this past year and ended up getting traded to the Yankees. Had some injury issues there, didn't really perform up to their expectations. But why do you like Benintendi for the Mariners?
Yeah, Benintendi is a guy who has just been pretty much the same player his entire career. As weird as that sounds, you're gonna get a big upgrade defensively in left field. Benintendi's won a couple Gold Gloves out there. He is probably the best defensive corner outfielder available. He's a left-handed bat. There's not going to be a ton of power here. Maybe it's 16 to 20 home runs, somewhere in that range. But he's a pretty safe bet to hit 270, 280. He's going to have good on-base percentage skills. He's still relatively young. I don't think the age is all that much of a factor here, but he's just a good, solid overall player. He's not an all-star, at least not most years. He's not he's not, a foundational player, but he is one of those guys that, the really good teams they all have. He's just a really solid piece, and there's basically very little concern that he's going to be a hole in your lineup. I think ideally Benintendi's a guy who hits like 7 for you. But he is one of the best corner outfielders on this pretty thin market. And he's just overall just a good, solid player. There's nothing spectacular about Benintendi. He's just good. And the Mariners need good players.
Outside of a shortened 2020 season, and by the way, Colby, Andrew Benintendi is my number 7 as well here. Outside of 14 games in 2020, that's all he was able to play due to injury. That he had a 42 WRC plus that year. Outside of that, he's always recorded a WRC plus over 100 in a season. 2016 he did it. 2017 he did it. 2018 he did it. 2019 he did it. 2021 he did it. And then this year, a 122 WRC plus, which is the second best mark of his entire career. 304, 373, 399. And that slugging percentage is, it's not great for someone that's hitting above 300, but that's not what he does, right? Like, power is not his game. He hit 5 home runs. He has typically been a 15 to 20-ish home run guy in the past. He hit 20 in 2017, 16 in 2018, 13 in 2019, 17 in 2021, but that's kind of diminished as of late. And again, playing a big ballpark like Kauffman as well is also going to hamper those numbers a bit. But he's a surefire bet to give you a 100 plus WRC plus. And good defense as well. Pretty good defense. He's a decent base runner as well. So yeah, it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he's also very CTZ. Yep. Ranks very highly in chase rate, ranks very highly in walk percentage. Contact rates are all really good. So yeah, he's a very CTZ type of bat, and I would suspect Jerry and Justin are pretty interested in Benintendi. It's just going to be what's his market look like. But I think he's more of like a 460 than he is like a 5-100 type of guy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially for a guy that's not going to give you a ton of power. At least that's what he wasn't able to give you last year. There's going to be a limit on someone like that's market. Yeah. All right, so coming in here at number 6, a guy that we talked about on yesterday's show, and a guy that the Mariners have outright said they're interested in. It's right-handed pitcher out of Japan, Kodai Senga. So why is Senga so high on your list?
Mostly the fastball splitter combo. If we're being honest, it gives those two pitches give him a higher upside than Tyone and Bassett, and also but I think he has a similar floor to Tyone at least. Bassett is kind of probably safer than Senga is, but he doesn't quite carry that number 2 upside that Senga does. So just a little bit of a, you're kind of, nitpicking here a little bit, but I feel like Senga's fastball splitter combo is so lethal, or so potentially lethal, that it gives him a good chance to pitch towards the top. Not a good chance. It gives him a better chance to pitch towards the top of a really good rotation than Bassett's current skill set does. But yeah, we talked about Senga a lot yesterday. You guys know about him if you listened to yesterday's show. It's upper 90s fastball with a wipeout splitter, and then the breaking balls. They're kind of iffy. So the Mariners can sharpen one up. I think they got a really strong number 3, maybe a number 2 even. If they can't, then I think he's a number 4, number 5 type. So it's in, when you factor in age and cost, probability, all that stuff, I just think he's a little bit of a better bet than Bassett, but I think they're very, very close.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So coming in at number 6 for me is your number 8, Chris Bassett. I'm not going to rehash everything that you talked about with Bassett. I would just say this. Chris Bassett, to me, is kind of like the pitcher version of Andrew Benintendi. He's just kind of a sure bet to give you number 3, number 4 off, and you just roll with it. And there's like a little bit of upside there, but I agree with you that, someone like Senga provides a bit more upside, but I'll talk about Senga in just a little bit. Let's go to number 5 here for you as we enter our top 5. This one's a little bit surprising for me, because this guy, I'm just going to say it, he's not on my list because I think he's going to be way too expensive for the Mariners, but you have Carlos Rodon on here. So why did Rodon make your list?
Yeah, he barely did, because I, like you, I don't think that he's going to sign with the Mariners, but I think there's enough of a shot just hearing the Mariners connected to Senga, hearing that they're getting calls on both Flexen and Marco, and it sounds like they're actively pushing to trade both of those guys. It leads me to believe that the Mariners are looking to make a pretty significant impact into their rotation. And Rodon, to me, is the best arm that is a possibility, right? Like he's not as good as Verlander or DeGrom, but neither of those guys are signing with Seattle. There's a 0% chance that happens. So even though there's only probably like a 2 to 5% chance that Rodon would sign in Seattle, because of all the chatter we're hearing right now about how the Mariners are seemingly look pretty intent on trying to upgrade their rotation, which is not something we saw coming really. I just went with the best guy, who I think is the best arm available, who actually has a chance, any chance whatsoever, to sign with the Mariners. I don't want to say a good chance, but I do think it's a possibility. And hey, you want to give Carlos Rodon the Robbie Ray contract and go, Castillo, Rodon, Kirby, Ray, Gilbert, like, okay, works for me. So he barely made the list. If we'd done this a week ago, he probably wouldn't have, but the Mariners seeming intent on, really upgrading their rotation. They're already good rotation. Was just enough for me to put him on the list here.
Yeah, it seems like they're actually going to be aggressive on that front. I don't know, man. There's some projections that have Rodon making like $27 million a year, and if that actually happens, I can't see the Mariners being in that kind of market. I think probably $15-16 million a year is maybe their cap. But like you said, I'm not opposed if they want to add Carlos Rodon to this rotation. That'd be pretty great. That'd be pretty great. Coming in at number 5 for me is Kodai Senga, and again, not going to rehash everything that Colby said, but a fastball that can flirt with triple digits and that ghosts fork. I mean, yeah. I also think that a major league pitching staff can get more out of at least one of his breaking pitches, specifically that slider, because the release point on that slider paired with his release point on his fastball, that's going to be really tough for guys to pick up on. So there's a lot that I like about Senga, and that's why he's, spoiler alert, my top pitcher on this list. So the next 4, Colby, you and I are both in agreement on, so we're going to announce these together, reveal these together, what have you. Number 4, The man who the Mariners have reportedly formally reached out to as of today, per John Morosi, outfielder Brandon Nimmo. This is a guy that you and I have talked a lot about in the build-up to free agency, and now that we're here, it seems like the Mariners are also in agreement that he would be a pretty good fit in Seattle. So why is that?
Yeah, he's an outfielder who hits left-handed. Very, very good on base skills. I would say elite on base skills. He's going to hit for a high average. He can play center field if you need him to. He's actually fine out there. He's going to be really good in left field. He hits towards the top of the order. He's not a big stolen base guy, but there's plenty of speed here. There's kind of the slashing line drive type of swing that works really well in Seattle. He's just kind of, again, there are no perfect fits in free agency, but he might be the best just standalone fit for this ball club because Nemo's a guy who's going to hit first or second for you. He's going to play a really good left field. He's going to hit for a high average. He's going to draw a ton of walks. And his swing actually works pretty well power wise for Seattle. He's not going to be a big, 25, 30 home run guy no matter where he goes, but I think the swing actually fits and he's going to hit a few more home runs. He's going to hit, uh, you know, he's more of a double triple guy, but I think he hits a few more home runs in Seattle than he would if he was playing back in New York. So he's just a great fit. He's everything Jerry talked about wanting. He's corner outfielder, hits left-handed, runs the base as well. Good defender. He checks a lot of the boxes for the Mariners' current lineup. So I just if he feels like he's the best fit, who also has a good chance of signing with Seattle.
In previous seasons, Brandon Nimmo has walked 18.1% of the time, 14.7% of the time, 14% of the time, 15.3% of the time. The dude just gets on base. He's finished 3 separate seasons, Colby, with an on-base percentage above 400. It's ridiculous. Plus, he's a really good defender. His glove will play up really well in left field, and he can also play center field pretty well. So if this year, or if next year is like this year, and Julio goes down for a little bit, knock on wood, then Nimmo, you actually have someone in Nimmo that can go out there and play what I would consider to be a slightly above average center field, if not pretty clearly above average center field. So that would be nice to have in your back pocket as well. Nimmo he fits, man. He makes so much sense for this team. It's not a surprise whatsoever that they reached out to him today or whenever they did officially. But yeah, I think you and I would both be ecstatic if they end up signing Brandon Nimmo this offseason. All right, number 3, we're getting into the shortstops here. And let's just say it right now, Dansby Swanson is not on here. Dansby Swanson didn't make it because, Colby, I think you and I are also both in agreement that he's either staying in Atlanta or he is going to another top-tier National League team, right?
I think it's more about he's just an East Coast guy.
Right,
so
okay.
I could see Baltimore getting involved here. I could see Boston maybe getting involved here. But yeah, I felt like the odds of Dansby signing here were so low that it was just kind of a waste of time to put him on a waste of time to really talk about him. And hey, if he does end up signing here, we'll talk about him a ton. But it's just I just don't see any scenario where that actually happens.
Mm-hmm. So Xander Bogaerts comes in at number 3 for the both of us. I flip-flop on this a lot personally. It's just a lot of these guys are so close, especially when you consider some of the contract projections are all over the place for these 3 guys. So that does factor in, and that does bring them a little bit closer for me. Like if I can get Xander Bogaerts for 6 years and $190 million compared to 10 years, $300 million for Carlos Correa, that's going to close the gap a little bit for me, But Xander comes in at number 3, nevertheless. So why is that? Why is he at the bottom of your 3 shortstops here?
Yeah, he's probably the worst defender of the 3 shortstops here. He's also, I believe, the oldest. He might be. I think he's I'm not sure about Turner. He might be younger than Turner, but I don't think so. I think he's the oldest. I also think he is the most likely to have to move to third base um, the soonest, if that makes sense. It's just a bunch of those little things that, in 2023, they don't really matter. You're not really concerned about. But at
By the way,
the length,
he's a few months older than Trey.
okay. So yeah, like decades basically
Yeah,
in free
yeah.
agency. So yeah, he's just a little bit older, a little bit worse defender. Not quite as, I don't want to say not as dynamic, but he's really not. Like the other two guys just provide a little bit more. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the ability to just like take over a game and win it by
Hmm.
yourself. The other two guys just have that a little bit more than Xander. Xander's a great player. And if the Mariners end up with Xander Bogaerts, there will be no complaints on this end. But
Yeah.
when you're trying to differentiate between these top three guys, you just kind of have to nitpick a little bit. And I just thought that Bogarts' warts, quote unquote, were just a little bit harder to ignore than Correa or Turner's.
Yeah. I think the one, positive on him would be that he might be the easiest to land, even though he's
Yeah.
a Boris guy, because it's just there's probably no threat whatsoever of him getting an 8-year, 9-year, 10-year deal on the market.
Yeah.
So that fits more in line with what I think the Mariners want, is to land someone more so in line with what Marcus Semien maybe got in Texas.
Yeah.
And so I think that's honestly, I think Xander ends up getting pretty much the Marcus Semien contract wherever he signs. And so I think that fits better for the Mariners. I also don't think that his defense is necessarily as bad as advertised, and I think that Perry Hill can help with that a bit as well, potentially. So, all right, let's move on to Carlos Correa here, who's our number 2. That's right, Correa, number 2, not number 1 on this list. Why is that, Colby?
Because the guy at number 1 is just better. Like he's just a better
Yeah.
player. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Also, the thing with Correa is I think there's a chance that he ends up being the most expensive one of the quartet because he is the youngest by fairly significant margin. I think he's a
Mm-hmm.
year and a half younger than Turner. I think he's a full year younger than Dansby, maybe even 2. He's just a younger player. We know who Carlos Correa is. He has all the pedigree in the world. He's a plus defensive shortstop. He's the best defensive shortstop on the market. He's a guy who 30 home run power. He's a guy who, when healthy, he's an all-star. He is an elite player in this league. But I feel like the guy ahead of him is just simply better, a better overall player. But Correa, if not for the back issues surrounding Correa, he probably would get, the Corey Seager contract, and
Mm-hmm.
that's, I guess, good news for the Mariners that he does have this back issue because it seems unlikely he's going to get the Seager contract. But I think it's a possibility. I think there's signability concerns here with both of the top 2 guys in relations to the Mariners, but I do think they're interested in both. I do think they're going to make offers on both. So if they're showing the same amount of interest in these 2 players, I'm just going to rank the better player number
Mm-hmm.
1 and the second best player number 2. It's really just that simple. So yeah, Correa is a very good player. He would be a very good fit here in Seattle. But he's just not Trey Turner, so he's number 2.
Yeah, it's for me, I feel like Correa is overrated in the sense that, people make him out to be this superstar, and he's not a superstar. So really, really good player though, with tons of power and
He's
good on
Corey
base skills
Seager.
and really good defense. At a premium position, all that stuff. Yeah, no, exactly. He's like right-handed Corey Seager, pretty much. But the back issues do concern me, and going back to the whole star conversation, I think, if anyone out of this class that we're talking about, at least, obviously there's the Aaron Judges of the world, but if anyone out of the guys that we're talking about today is a star, like a legitimate, like, superstar, I think Trey Turner is the closest to that.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's my number one, and I assume why he's your number one. So let's talk about Trey Turner. We've kind of avoided talking about Trey, mostly because you and I don't want to dream. we don't want to get our hopes up here. We don't even want to open ourselves up to the possibility, because more likely than not, we are going to end up being disappointed here, because all signs point to Turner landing somewhere on the East Coast. There was a report from Jason Stark yesterday that said that people close to Turner believe that he really wants to play for the Phillies and reunite with Bryce Harper. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously the Dodgers, I'm sure, are still going to want to keep him. There's going to be other good teams that are in on Turner because he's a really good player. He's been a 6 F4 player for the last 2 seasons. But there's been folks like John Morosi and Jeff Passan who've said, I think Turner is actually an option for the Mariners. So we're listening, but again, we're not opening ourselves up too much here to the possibility, because we both love Trey Turner. Colby is a Trey Turner stan. He said that he would get a Trey Turner jersey if the Mariners actually sign him. Yeah, so let's talk about Trey Turner. Why do you love him? What does he bring to the table? All that.
Pretty good shortstop, not an elite defender, but pretty darn good. He's one of the fastest guys in baseball still, despite being 30 years old. He has 20 home run power up the middle, maybe even 25. Fun little note. Last year, he drove in 100 runs. He had 100 RBI. He scored 100 runs. He is a guy who can steal 30, 40 bags. He's just kind of the overall package. He hits righties. He hits lefties. He can hit anywhere you want in the order 1 through 9. Pick a spot. It's a good spot for Trey Turner. He's a great player. He draws walks. He, puts the ball in play with regularity. He's just overall, there's very few weaknesses in his game. He's just a great player. He's got a ton of playoff experience, if that type of thing matters to you. And it's just the power speed combo is pretty hard to find. And when you find it in a guy who can also play shortstop or second base, maybe even center field if you absolutely needed him to, when you find that type of profile up the middle, it's incredibly rare that those guys become available. And it's even more rare that those guys even get linked to the Seattle Mariners. So, ultimately, I think Trey Turner probably ends up with the Dodgers or somewhere back east. But the Mariners are being mentioned a lot here, and so much so that I have to wonder what's being said behind closed doors, or is this like a legitimate thing the Mariners are really interested in? We've heard people say Jerry loves him, and the Mariners just keep on getting thrown into this conversation. Is that real, or is that a leverage play? Is Trey Turner trying to leverage the Mariners to get a bigger deal from somewhere else? I guess we're going to find out, because here in, I think, 20-ish minutes, players are free to sign with anybody they want. So Turner's not going to sign in 20 minutes, but there's enough smoke around Trey Turner going to the Mariners that it's enough for me to at least entertain it as a possibility, which is at that point makes Turner an easy number one for me.
Yeah, that's exactly why he ended up on this list. Whereas Dansby did not, because we haven't heard anything on Dansby and the Mariners. No. But we've heard, and honestly, we haven't really heard a lot about Correa and the Mariners. We've heard a little bit more than Dansby, but not much. It's mostly been Xander and Trey. And I think part of that is because those would be the 2 likeliest guys to move to second base as well, because Trey did it when he went to L.A. With Corey Seager there. He returned to shortstop this past season, though. But he's done it.
Real fast here, though. It doesn't matter what Jerry Dipoto says. If they have an opportunity to land Trey Turner, but Turner wants to play shortstop, J.P. Crawford is moving. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
J.P. Crawford will not stop the Seattle Mariners from signing Trey Turner. So if Turner signs elsewhere, it doesn't matter what anybody tells you. The reason he signed elsewhere is not going to be because the Mariners are like, oh, well, you have to play second base because we have J.P. Crawford. That is not going to happen.
Yeah, no. But I think that, the second base stuff does need to be mentioned here because he has done it. And, with the shift ban, you're going to need a lot of athleticism there at second and shortstop to cover more ground. And Turner can do that and then some. The other thing, too, you mentioned it earlier, right? Like, I feel like Trey Turner gets looked at as like this little dude who just he's a slap hitter and he just gets on base and he steals bases and all that stuff. I mean, he's 6'2", 185 according to Fangraphs. He's probably a little bit heavier than that, but he's 6'2", and he's hit 20 plus home runs the last 2 years. He had a .536 slugging percentage in 2021. He had a .466 slugging percentage this past season. Dude rakes. He rakes. He steals bases. And if you put him at the top of the lineup with Julio Rodriguez, that's the most electric top of the lineup in all of baseball. Just going to say it. But I am not going to allow myself to think about Trey Turner and Julio Rodriguez at the top of the Mariners lineup because I'm too scared of getting hurt. But yes, he is our number one free agent target. And that's going to conclude our list as we reach the 40-minute mark here. We are definitely going to hear from our overlords at Locked On about that. Sorry, guys. This was a special occasion, however. But that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. That's DaneGNZLZ. And Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast featuring the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts just like us. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.